Today we're going to do some file hashing, checking for some malware, indicators of compromise, and the cool thing is when we're done it's portable. I'm going to go ahead and just jump in. I can do some talking. Some of these processes take a little bit to run. So the first file we want to run is to get our master hash list. And I've given you a link here that we can go to at virus.com, and you see there's currently 404 files here. All of them are text files. So what we're going to do is download them all and we're going to merge them together so that we can import them so we can hash against them. One of the things that we want to do is define our path. So what I'm going to show you real quick is my C hash. The only thing in here right now is my PowerShell scripts. These are all the ones that are on GitHub. You'll download, and hopefully first round you'll just follow a similar path. It just makes it easier with some of the scripting. So what we're going to do is open our downloads, and we're going to verify what the path is. And I called it temp, and you'll kind of see toward the end, because after we do this, we're not going to need it anymore. Everything in the temp file we'll be able to dump. So basically creating a downloads folder, and I'm saying I want files from 0 up to 404. And in a nutshell, what it's going to do, it's going to reach out, grab each of them, and pull them in. So we'll go ahead and get this one started. I don't know why I'm typing it, made a bunch of little shortcuts over here. Nothing worse than technical files and people sitting there talking. Okay, so while this is running, you can see from 1 to about 148, they're 4 meg files. From 149 up to 404, they're 2 meg files. So this will go pretty quick. But while it's running, there's not much more in this file that we can do. So once it gets done, is what we're going to do. Let me come back to my list so we go in order. Is we're going to merge all of the hash files. So over here's a script for merging the hash files. And there is a reason I did 4 separate PowerShells. I could have made them all in one. But through different stages, we're going to run like definitely 2 of them concurrently. And I thought it'd just be easier to break them out. So we can see that this path matches the previous path. So that's where all of our files are. But also notice I only have 403 instead of 404. I did that on purpose. You'll see what we're going to do with 404. Because right now we're just building our setup. Once it's done, this is the longest part. But once we get through and the files are merged, daily maintenance, weekly or monthly becomes real easy. One thing I want to point out, simultaneous jobs for merging. I've played with a few different running simultaneous jobs. This computer here has 64 gig of RAM. RAM not a problem. Processor never got over 20%, but it buffered out on me. I think the file's just so much data. Doing the merging, the 2 parts to it were, one, writing to the master files, and notice I have 2 of them. And with one, it was 22 minutes just running one at a time. And we did have to put a little bit of a buffer in here because a bunch of files cannot write to a text file at one time. You'll get a locking error. So in a nutshell, all I did was say, hey, give me the even numbers. Let's throw here and throw the odds in this one. And what I did notice, from 22 minutes, it dropped it down to 11. I did bump it up to 4 at one point, and it only dropped it by 2 minutes at that point. So 2 minutes versus the import, this is easy enough to manage, and it's an extra 2 minutes, not a big deal. Let's see where we are. Okay, so all of the files have downloaded. Notice this one right here, unpacked. This one, they say, is from 0 up to 122. And I've tried matching the hashes, and they're not in there. So at some point, we'll be pulling this in after I do more validation on it. But for now, we're downloading. So for now, we'll go ahead and get the merging going. So notice I got the merge hash. So it's going to go ahead and kick off and start running. I just put these little write statements in here so we can kind of see what it's doing in the momentum. You can see starting, reading, then complete. So it'll buffer up to 8, then just start cycling through. And like I said, this right here will probably take about 11 minutes. But while it's running, we're going to go ahead and open a second window. And in the second window, we are going to go ahead and start doing a local hash. And while it's running, I'll go ahead and talk about the hash file. So you can see both of these are running. 5 jobs because I have 5 drives. So if I jump in here, what are we looking at? So what is my algorithm I want to hash? So I'm doing MD5 because everything in virus share is all MD5s. But I've already set it up so you can do, either SHA1 or 256. Next, we want to set up, what are your drive letters? I thought about building an array using PS drive, but as users, you might only want to hash specific drives. So just go in here, update to your drive letters. The other thing is I'm only doing specific extensions. Does it make sense to hit, every file? Well, in some cases the answer is yes. But what I did is did a quick search, open source. These are kind of the top 10 lists that are out there. I'll probably, refine it as we move forward. The next one is the output file name. So what I've done, and it's down below. The log path, you can see it to go into results. It'll be date timestamp. So if you run it multiple times, you can have multiple versions of your hashed output. I do plan on doing a data integrity hashing in the upcoming, so it'll be able to build off of this. So if you want to run it against multiple computers, bring it together, we're naming it by computer name and what the algorithm is, so that we're able to identify it easy. And from there, kind of similar. I can run 8 jobs at once. Notice mine kicked off, said finishing 5 jobs up, because there's only 5 drives in here. So create drives, again, pretty easy. Let's minimize, see where we are. So we can definitely see drive C being the biggest. I'll bring it down, just look at the CPU utilization for a moment. And we can also see, because I'm hashing the C drive, that's probably taken most of the resources up. But again, just to kind of give you an idea, a little bit of balance there. Okay, so we'll jump back in. We're creating a local hash, so we're done with that file. We're merging, and we're good with that one. The other thing that we can go ahead and get started, we'll go back to the README. So we're merging the files. We're creating a hash. And I'm pretty much trying to step you through each of the things to check. So while those two are running, we can go ahead and download and put SQLite in. I found SQLite because it's portable, serverless. Actually turned out to be great. So in the file, again, we're going to define the path, we're going to define our hash path, and our SQL path. This is the current file name that's out here in downloads. So if I go to SQL download, I can look. The main file that we're looking for is under precompiled binaries, and you can see the numbers match. I could download this manually, but again, I wanted to make it as easy as I could for everybody. So this script here will automatically download it, install it, and get it set up for us. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the third window. And we're going to go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and go to our hash. Okay. So I'll flip back to this window real quick. So you can see created a folder called SQLite, also created 2 other folders called scripts and DB. So if I jump back here, remember we only had the PowerShell folder. The results, this is being built from our local hash. But then the temp folder, we can see here, and we can see that it's constantly writing to our 2 masters. So, okay. So we're going to jump over to this window here. First thing we're going to want to do, and if you're not familiar with SQL, some of the commands I've included. but we can do like .SQL tables and we see nothing shows up. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to import this file. We're going to read it. This is going to create our 3 master tables for our hashes. These are our master hashes, like what we're downloading from virus share. The other thing, we created a primary key. One thing definitely take a note is I did nvarchar for the hash, and for MD5 32, for SHA1 it's 40, and for 256 it's 64. We also told them all not to be null, and we don't want it to be case sensitive. Case sensitive is super important with SQLite. The biggest thing I found going through the testing of all this is, one, and I'll scroll down just a little bit further. I'll get to the index and stuff for a moment, talk about the case. So the imported, this is where we will take our local hashes and import them to. And they will come from either temp master or temp local. So the easiest way to explain it, we're going to take the raw file and, like for the virus share, and we're going to bring it into temp master. And it's just going to bring it in at nvarchar 256. We just want to get into the database so that we can do a little bit of manipulation. And you'll see in the script, one of the things we're going to do when we transfer from temp master, as an example, to MD5, is we're going to force lowercase across the board. And this 10 times performance increase. So if you're wondering why I just didn't bring it straight into the table, it's hard to massage the data prior to, and SQL is so efficient, it's probably the best place to do it. Also going to create 3 views. If you don't know the difference, a view is a table but without data. So basically this view here will do the comparison for us from when we import from our local hash into the master hash. So to create those for us. The other thing I've done with the hash tables, notice I have the hash here. Each of the, like master MD5, we're going to create an index on hash. This also huge performance increase when you're running. Yes, the import is a little bit slower, and when I say a little bit slower, probably 2 to 3 times longer. But the value is when you're running queries, between the imported and the master, they will execute super fast. And you'll see as we come up. Then also just kind of threw down here a few drop statements. We're not going to use them. We're not building anything to it. So we're going to go ahead and import to create tables and indexes into SQL. And the cool, easiest way to do it is when let's just go to the folder so you can see it. One of the reasons I mentioned having it in the path is here's our SQL file. It copied it from here into our SQLite, into our scripts folder. So it makes it easy, especially for me when I'm writing the instruction, to point you in the right direction. Come on. I don't know why copy paste is acting funky. Okay, so we're going to read it and it executed. So now we can do dot tables and we can see it built and created everything for us. I could do schema, and we'll pick one since we're using master MD5. I'll just say, let's look at this. That little dance semicolon get me every time. But we can look at the schema on things. Semicolon. Use SQL, you don't need it. SQLite, Linux, got it. Okay. So we can also look at our indexes. So if I do dot indexes, and here's all the indexes that were created. So pretty much now we're just kind of waiting on our files to get done. So I'm going to go ahead and quit for the moment, and we'll jump back into SQLite. DB, we can see here's our database. Now we can see the merging of all the files is completed. I apologize, I said 11 minutes, it took 12 minutes this time. Not a big deal. So pretty good. So we'll go ahead and close that window. Over here, in this window, we can see that it took 11 minutes to hash 5 drives. So, good stuff, and we're done with that, because we only need the one window open. We'll go ahead and look at the results just kind of real quick. So if I go to my temp folder, virus share, I can see master 1, master 2, both are 600 meg. Definitely workable. If I go to the results, we can see the date timestamp folder, and here is a hash that is 25 meg in size. We do want to make note of the folder stamp because we will have to modify when we import that. So first thing we're going to do, let's get rid of that window. We're going to go ahead and open SQLite back up. Okay. So you could run it directly from the SQLite folder. I just do literal paths all the way through. That way I don't have to worry about stuff. One of the things I like to do is turn timer on. So when I run commands, it kind of tells me how long it takes. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, and all of these are in the file, and we'll bring it up once it starts. So timer on, and we are importing first master 1. And once it gets done, because of how I set the file up, we'll go ahead and close this. So if we go down, we've already set this up and we've executed this. So what I did is I fat fingered this one, but you can copy this and dump it right in the window. So as temp 1 gets done, temp 2 will start. Usually I will grab to include the line below it so I can get a count. And sometimes, so we can see number 2 has already started. Okay, so we see it imported both. We can see we have 36,241,405 hashes. So that's quite a bit. The other thing we want to do, before I import it, is let's take a look at some of the data. I definitely, please use limit. And we'll just say limit 100. If you don't, you can control break out of it, not a big deal, but we just want to look. Jeez. Okay, so we can see our data looks like hashes, so that's a good thing. We just want to kind of look at the first few, make sure everything looks good before we import it. Let's go to, yep. So now that we know we have all the files in there, we're going to go ahead and import this into the master table. And I want to show you 2 things about it before we get it going. So the table we built with hash. So we're going to insert into master MD5. We're going to insert into the columns hash, source, and CDD ID. Now, what each of these are, first, we're taking the hash and we're converting it to lowercase while we're importing it. In between these brackets here, because this is the source, the second in line, I want to know that it came from where it originated. So as you're importing other batches, you can identify the sites where it came from. Then if you're doing any logging under the CDD ID, you could actually put an integer in here, put a number that would reference back to your database or how you track it. This process here will take a little bit, again, because it has to index, convert to lower, but that's okay. This is a one and done. We're going to do it one time and hopefully be done long term. Okay, so finished importing. We can see here it took 1,143 seconds. Turns out about 19 minutes. So again, the longest part, but in the long run, this will save you a lot of time when you're doing multiple hashes. So we're going to jump in, take a look. So let's make sure the data looks good. And we will limit to 10. If I do the from again. So data looks good. We see our ID column, we see the hash, we see virus share, and because I didn't put nothing in CDD nothing there, so all good. Let's also see what our count looks like. So if we remember, we have 405, so select count, master temp, master MD5. So here we see, we have 402. So what that's telling me is that we had 3 hashes that were duplicate. So now that we're done, we have everything in the master temp DB, or in the master MD5. We're going to go ahead and delete. And in fact, before we do it, just for some who not, fully database savvy, our database is currently 5 gig. So that's kind of big. But if we think about it, we currently have 2 tables that have all of these hashes in it. So we're going to go ahead and delete from brain fart. We're going to delete from the master temp master DB. And once those are gone, here's something kind of cool we can do, and I definitely recommend anytime you do some large imports, even with your local hashes, when you have data that moves in and out, the database will grow, but what it will never do is shrink. So we're going to go ahead and quit, jump back out to a command prompt, and we are going to run. There's a utility, it's part of the command line, but if we take the database and tell it to vacuum, that is essentially compress. And it'll take it, maybe 5 minutes. But as what I'll do is bring this window up, and you can see probably in about a minute or so, the journal file will pop up. And as what it's doing is taking all the data from here, writing it to a new database, and it's also re-indexing. Might have should have done this after the next step, but we can do it again to kind of show you, especially for performance. So with all of our records imported into the master, all of our master hash values, I want to call it, and we've re-indexed, so now they're in order, we're ready to get going. Okay, now that our database is set up, one of the things I want to do, I'm just going to make a copy of this. Could probably compress it, do a few other things. I'm just going to throw it out here real quick. Copy's pretty quick, so now we'll go back. And the nice thing is your database is set up ready to go. So very portable, and I'll show you the final pieces on that. So let's jump back into the database and start doing some hashing. So first thing we want to do is find our folder. Open this other window. First thing we want to do is find the folder that our results are in, because we're going to need that file path. Okay. One of the things I want you to note is the direction of the slashes. It's different than you would do at a command prompt. If you do want to use backslash, you just have to put 2 in. And I believe we illustrated that. Did not, I took it out. But if we look at how traditional paths, if you wanted to copy and paste, so if I copy from here, and we will drop directly underneath, notice all the backslashes, forward slashes. So just make sure when you're defining the path, that use forward slashes. If you're stuck on using backslashes because they're escape characters, is what you would have to do is double each of them. It's just easier for me, doing the single like that. Okay. So what we've done is we just imported all of our records. And from our local hash that we just generated a little bit ago, it's saying that there's 142,000 records. Here's something I want to show you though. Out of the 142,000, because it became apparent when I was importing, trying to figure out why all the records were not importing. If we look at that, like this hash value as an example, there are 864 files that match this hash. So you can see the large number. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and import it and look at the delta. Okay, so we're going to insert, and the reason ignore is here, I should have said it in the previous one when we went to master MD5. Because the table is set up with indexing and each of the hashes have to be unique, ignore allows us to just ignore it instead of having all the errors pop up. So we're going to insert or ignore into our imported MD5. We're going to bring in the hash and the path. We're also going to convert the lower, and it's coming from local temp, what we just imported into. So we'll go ahead and run that, and you can see imported very quick. Now, let's do the select count star from imported MD5 . Okay, 60,000. So remember our original number was like 142,000. So when you're talking about hashing, speed, efficiency, do we really want to hash every single one of these files when we know they're the same? So let's just pick a hash. I'll pick this last one. And so we're going to come into temp local and we're going to look where the hash equals this hash here. And it's going to give us the hash and the path. So we can see in Microsoft's infinite wisdom, these are all licensed RTF files which we're hashing, and look, the hash values are the same. But we have 864 instances, a lot of it because of different versioning and different countries, languages. So we want to eliminate them. And at least with having the local temp still there, you're able to kind of go in and do a little research if one of them pops. So just kind of, we've made it much more efficient. So now what we're going to do is get to the meat of it. So we're going to do select star from the view that we created early on. And this is going to compare what's in the imported MD5 to our master hash table. So we can see we just filtered through 36 million files, and these are the ones that are coming back kind of with, I'm not going to say positive hits, but they match our database. So from here down, putty, they all have something in them that could, that's triggering it. So what I like to do, if I'm online connected to the internet, because there's times you won't be, you have to figure out how to get the hashes out. So let's just go ahead and flip into the body. So here you can see created a script that's now going to take those values that we just seen on the screen, and it's going to dump us out a results file. And it's pulling from the same view, and because we've changed our mode, we need to set our output mode back to standard. Here we go, that looked better. Don't know, there was something with the copy paste. So now if we come into our hash folder, we put it in results. Here's our results file. So I'm going to double click open it. and it's pretty much what we've seen on the screen. But what I'm going to focus on, I'm just going to reach out and grab all of these hash values. I'm going to do a copy. Then we're going to jump on the internet. Again, the luxury of having the internet, some places you won't. So this site here, I ain't even going to try and pronounce it. If we click on to get started, I can come right in and paste up to 1,000 hashes in one shot and tell it to submit. And this is running across multiple databases. So we see out of all of my files, there's one that it's kind of triggered on. So what I'm going to do is just copy that one, and I'm going to go to virus total, come into search, and I'm going to right click paste. And we see it came back with 0 in this window. But here's one thing that kind of stumped me. I was like, what is this file? But searching through, notice it's 0 bytes. So the file name could be different, and if the file is 0 bytes, it's going to return the same hash, even with different file names. So if I open our window back up, do a Control F, I can see right here that there's an image. So if I grab the whole path out to here, we always want to validate it, right? So we'll just kind of throw it in here. I'll go to View, Details. Look at that, 0 bytes, okay? So we've kind of eliminated that false positive. And based on this, I think I'm in pretty good shape. One of the things, you know, I'm not saying it's tough, but I could go into the master MD5, create a new column for false positive. But I think that could lead us down a road that if one of the executables, you know, during first view showed up and was a false positive, but the next time maybe not. So, you know, just kind of keep that in mind. Probably one last thing, you know, before jumping out, because I had the file open, it wouldn't save to it. Didn't mean to hit it that quick. Don't save. Okay. So I want to step through each of them, starting with headers on. Then we're going to set our output mode back to CSV. We're actually going to change our output file. I want to call it hash only, right? Now we'll come in and run our view, but instead of selecting the file and path, I'm just going to say hash, right? And now we'll set our output back to standard out. So kind of did this because if you're in standalone systems, how do we validate, you know, some of the files? So with the hash only, it won't display any names. It gives us hash only. So a little bit of value in being able to dump this out or print it if you have to go over to a computer and fat finger them. You know, it's what we have to do to be able to validate. So I think I've covered just about everything. Okay, so the last thing we really want to do is kind of clean our database up for the next import. Let's say I'm done with, you know, I've reviewed all these files, they look good, I want to get ready for the next one. So what we can do is we can delete all of the data from the imported and the temps. Okay, so quick little, it's down in the bottom of right here. So what I did is just pretty much just copied these, pasted them in, so it deletes everything from the imported tables and the temp tables. So then the last thing we want to do, make sure your paths are correct. We'll go ahead and do a vacuum, and I'll show you the final step. All right, so while that's vacuuming, we will jump over here for a moment. So the nice thing, once this gets complete compressed, we can actually come in, all of our results, we've deleted all the data from here. And if you don't want to keep the results or all of these all the files from virus share, you can delete them. Don't need them anymore. So we can come in here, right click, delete. And once this gets done, now if we wanted to throw this on some sort of media to be able to take any standalones, we can, and it's fully executable from here. The only scripts you would really run would be here to create the local hash. We've already downloaded everything. Everything's been merged. So you would just execute this. Then all you would have to do is do the imports pretty much from here down. Everything above is done. So at least with each instance, you can build it one time. And now all you're doing is just like we did, imported that one delta, that 404 file. Import your latest, vacuum it, and you're good to go. So with that, let's just make sure our database is done. It is. So I can jump in. Let's look at the size of the database. We're at 3.4 gig. And again, now you're set up for the next job. So have a good one. Thank you.